Story 1. It is to fill the leadership with sycophants. The problem is the military knows how to deal with bad leaders. Up-jump generals do not fire the weapons. Story 2. This administration has focused on eliminating opposition. Replacing military leaders with allies removes dissent. Even removing them without replacements raises fewer questions about decisions. Let's be clear. This administration aims to acquire Greenland by any means necessary and envisions Canada as the 51st state while considering military action against Mexico to combat cartels. I doubt military leaders would support these actions. Additionally, there is an executive order for military assistance to police. When this leads to attacks on U.S. citizens by this administration, military leaders may not be inclined to protect the Constitution. Story 3. It may be a strategic decision to consolidate control, as replacing leaders with loyal supporters is common in politics. However, this approach risks destabilizing the military's chain of command. Story 4. You have to go to Reuters, the non-U.S. news agency that broke the story, to find it. They claim it is for efficiency, but I think something suspicious is going on. Defense Secretary Hegseth plans to reduce the senior-most ranks of the military. Story 5. Congress and various secretaries of defense have been seeking to right-size the number of general officers and flag officers for years. A Congressional Research Service report from March 2024 highlights that Congress directed in the 2017 National Defense Authorization Act that the number of general officers and flag officers be reduced. In 2020, there were more 4-star and 3-star officers in the military than in 1970, when the armed forces had a total force of 3,066,294 military personnel, compared to 1,333,461 in 2020. Overall, the number of officers of all ranks also increased from 13.12% in 1970 to 16.19% in 2020, and 18.22% in 2023. Even former Secretary of Defense Robert Gates noted in 2010 that while the overall force structure was cut by 40% in the 1990s, the reduction in general and flag officers was about half of that. This results in multiple layers of command that must process and provide input on decisions. Reducing general and flag officers is not automatically a bad idea, even if it comes from the current Secretary of Defense. It will be informative to see which general and flag officers are removed from their positions and whether those positions are eliminated or filled with a more acceptable candidate to the administration. Story 6. It is a coup. He wants loyalists in place who will show loyalty to the leader and not to the Constitution. It is clear that everyone in the administration is trying to undermine and disregard it. Are there any amendments they have not criticized? It would be a shorter list than the ones they have. Story 7. What does everyone think is going on with Hegseth removing more top military leaders? He is consolidating power. He has fired, demoted, or pushed out all of the top leadership and advisory board members who are more loyal to the American people than to Trump personally. He is alienating everyone with integrity who takes their oaths seriously. So the only ones left are those who support their agenda or are simply Trump loyalists blindly following their leader's commands. It is the same strategy that historical dictators implemented in their takeover of their country's military apparatus. We are in for a very difficult time. Story 8. He is dismissing individuals they perceive as disloyal to him, likely to prevent a potential coup. Story 9. To have a successful coup, you need to remove all competent leadership. That is what is happening right now. Story 10. They are replacing professionals with a minimum of principles for loyalists. That is essentially it. This is a well-known strategy used by successful military organizations everywhere. Story 11. Weakening the military directly benefits Russia, which is the plan. At the same time, it also benefits any other military power that may have a grievance with the United States. In other words, it is high treason. Story 12. Anyone asking this question already has a good understanding of what they believe is happening. Story 13. Speaking as a military child, my father told me a long time ago that United States military leadership has been ineffective for a long time. My dad retired in the late 1990s and said the military was going to face difficulties. Between the 1980s and early 2000s, there were two major factions, those who got things done, and the sycophants. The sycophants rose to power. Once they took the top positions, they would blame those who got things done when their decisions failed because obviously the leaders couldn't be wrong. It must be the people below. The best example I can provide is when recruitment numbers dropped. A leader suggested reducing the fitness requirements. It is essential to understand that the requirements are in place for safety. My mother was a military officer in the 1980s and witnessed fellow female soldiers suffer from stress fractures. The expectations are high because the physical demands are significant. My own father had to struggle to maintain his weight within the required range until he retired. Well, look at some of the officers now, overweight and unhealthy. We need to reevaluate some of the leaders because they have failed their soldiers. I am pleased to see the reinstatement of fitness requirements. It is safer for the soldiers. Story 14. We have a smaller military than we did in World War II, yet we have more ranking officers than we did at that time. It makes sense when you consider the ratio in relation to the size of the military then compared to today. Therefore, having officers at a similar percentage of the force as in the past is, in my opinion, a positive development. Story 15. Note that Hegseth said he wants to cut 25% of leadership, and there are currently 8 black men among the 41 4-star generals. Story 16. Honestly, it is likely a strategy to ensure that the top military positions are occupied by loyalists in preparation for Trump's inevitable coup. Story 17. This is the laying of groundwork. I suspect they intend to use war powers to keep Trump in office. Thus, there will need to be an attack or other event that sends the United States onto a war footing, such as a terrorist attack, with no other choice than to suspend elections until Trump can handle the problem that he created. This would complete the conversion of the United States into a proper dictatorship. My bet is year 3 of the second term, before any next election candidates can get out there and muddy the waters. We are witnessing the end of the United States as we have known it. Story 18. The military is one of the biggest bureaucracies on earth. We have more generals now than we had during World War II. Story 19. Remove checks and balances that protect us from future military control by the emerging autocracy. Story 20. I believe these generals, who are career service members, must be frustrated that they are being dismissed by an intoxicated commentator from Fox News. Story 21. He is removing anyone smart or experienced enough to prevent him from committing a catastrophic event in America. They aim to round up liberals and eliminate what they perceive as a liberal threat. It began with Project 2025. The second phase is the American Crusade. Story 22. Most military leaders became leaders because they believe in protecting democracy. This administration needs to remove anyone who might defend democracy. Story 23. Trump wants to use the military against the civilian population. The first step is removing the leadership that would hesitate to follow those orders. Story 24. The military is top-heavy. We have more generals and admirals now than during World War II when the military was 4 times larger. There is no need for that many generals. A 20% reduction is probably not enough. Story 25. Decreasing the risk of a military coup. If enough military leaders decided to stand up for our Constitution against a lawless authoritarian, especially when members of Congress and the Supreme Court refuse to defend our nation and Constitution, they could remove Donald from power. PD is ensuring that this will never happen. Story 26. People who respect the Constitution are an obstacle, it seems. It is frightening. The termination of the Judge Advocate General lawyers was unacceptable as well. Story 27. Trying to ensure a Valkyrie situation does not happen with the current President of the United States, especially given the current trajectory of how things are going. Story 28. Hegseth has a grudge and an axe to grind, much like most of Boss Tweet's appointees. This is all about petty revenge and personal gain. Story 29. It's fascism mixed with incompetence, and large portions of the military apparatus are not in lockstep with it. Story 30. He is filling the upper levels with loyalists who will willingly send the military against United States citizens when the leader declares martial law. Story 31. It is a purge, plain and simple. That is literally authoritarianism. Purging military leadership to ensure loyalty. Story 32. Clearing out the professional soldiers to replace them with sycophants ensures that when Trump declares martial law, they will not push back against illegal orders. Story 33. If he is staging an actual authoritarian coup, replacing all of his most competent commanders with inexperienced individuals is beneficial for his opposition, which would likely include disaffected, highly skilled officers interested in preserving the Constitution. Story 34. It is clear they are trying to eliminate anyone who would disobey an unlawful order. I am sorry, but it is evident that this is their intention. Story 35. Look at Russia. Competency is not desired. Competent people are a threat because they will notice your incompetence and could replace you. Story 36. They clearly told him that he is an imbecile and is trying to hold him accountable. However, that is not what anyone in this administration is interested in. They will fire the competent people who have been upholding the nation's democracy so they can dismantle it and become the neo-fascist, capitalist individuals they have always dreamed of being. Story 37. He is likely eliminating anyone who would hesitate to order attacks on Americans within the United States. We are living in a post-constitutional dictatorship, and we are rapidly approaching martial law. The flaw in the plan is that he is actively fostering a resistance with the most intelligent and effective military leadership by doing so. It is going to get much worse before it gets better. Story 38. Just more evidence of foreign adversaries using power and compromising material to advance their goal of weakening the United States from within. They are making significant progress. Story 39. More of the quiet coup. Every dictatorship has a loyalist faction within the military. Next, you take over the judiciary and nullify the legislature. Now the capital is secured. You also have secret police and violent groups to deal with any uprising among the populace. These groups can be inserted into an otherwise peaceful protest, and the violence they create is used to disband the protest. People will be brutally injured to dissuade future protesters from even considering such an act. Think this is far-fetched? Look up the 2020 protests in Portland, Oregon, regarding George Floyd, where unmarked cars and violent individuals suddenly appeared out of nowhere. The former president threatened days prior to send in the military under the premise they had to protect federal buildings nearby. Or examine the protests in Oakland, California, which were noted as peaceful by the city's mayor, until a pallet of bricks suddenly appeared, and masked individuals came in from two sides. Meanwhile, 3 blocks away, at a federal building, 2 federal security officers were assassinated by a teen driving in an unmarked white van. It was only because of a random encounter later in a city 60 miles away that the assassins were arrested. They were members of a violent group with current military affiliations and possessing weapons from their own military base. Story 40. To be honest, I don't think anybody knows what is going on with the people in command. I am not American, but I hope it turns out well for everyone. Every day, waking up and seeing the news is really a surprise. Like going to the circus where a monkey shakes everyone's hand. It's strange, but after some time you get used to it. Story 41. If you eliminate all the individuals who are more competent than you become the most competent one. That is the direction this entire administration is taking. Story 42. When you feel inadequate, it can be intimidating to have capable individuals around you, as it emphasizes your own shortcomings. Story 43. They must be requiring loyalty oaths. Remember, we do not have a president, just an orange pope wannabe. Story 44. The obvious answer would be to remove military leaders who might oppose this administration's plans to invade Greenland, Mexico, or Canada. It appears to be preparation for a coup. Story 45. Purging the professionals and bringing in unqualified individuals to allow Putin to dictate military policies. Story 46. He is going to turn the military against the American people and is removing anyone who could be an obstacle. Story 47. A couple of days after the executive order where Trump gave them 90 days to figure out how to use the military domestically, it seems like someone was pulled into a meeting and did not bend the knee. Story 48. When the time comes, he needs leaders who will listen to him and to Cheeto Jesus without getting bogged down in issues of constitutionality. Story 49. To control the military. With the military under control, no one will stop them when they give the orders to commit harmful acts. Every dictatorship has enacted this. It is nothing new. Story 50. At best, it is a legitimate restructuring for efficiency, as claimed. There is some excess in the military right now. This compromises our national security because nothing the administration has done so far has been thoughtful. At worst, it is an attempt at a takeover by removing competent military personnel and keeping only sycophantic individuals. What do I think? If the midterms do not result in a shift in both houses, we might be in trouble. Story 51. I believe we should start praying to whatever deities we worship that they will uphold their oaths during the upcoming test. The judiciary cannot stop this. Congress cannot and will not stop this. Military intervention is the only solution that will help us out of this problem, though it may also create significant challenges on its own. Story 52. They are removing anyone who might oppose Trump. They are preparing for the worst and do not want anyone who supports the country over Trump present. Just in case. Story 53. They are preparing for a conflict aimed at distracting the public and do not want any generals or admirals who might speak out against sending young people into danger or wasting billions of dollars in regions where they have decided to initiate violence. Story 54. A coup or deposition typically occurs when the military of a nation does not respect election outcomes or the legal system, or when they believe that the leadership is failing to uphold the Constitution. Additionally, there is a desire to impose martial law to prolong a leader's tenure, resulting in the military detaining millions of people in concentration camps. They may justify this by labeling individuals as illegal immigrants or associated with gangs, but in the ensuing chaos, many other undesirables and political opponents may be targeted and executed. Story 55. Likely just removing potential dissenters. At this point, whoever they decide to support will be the one who ultimately governs the country. Story 56. The same issue is occurring with the exclusion of black individuals from the Marines. They are creating a racially homogeneous white military structure to target black and brown communities in the United States in the near future. Story 57. I won't get tired of saying it. Any regime must secure military support first, then they will target the judiciary and political opponents. I have seen it and lived it. I have witnessed the results. After that, there is no going back. That's why I and many others fled. No regime can survive without military backing. Many people think that this won't happen in the United States, but the same was said in my country. Story 58. What does every authoritarian government do before a crackdown? They purge those who would resist orders and replace them with loyal supporters. Story 59. Oh my God, America. It's going to be 10 years after the complete takeover of your country before you wake up. They even wrote the plan down and published it on a website. They are halfway through that list of how to take over the USA. And many of you are still thinking, I think they might be up to something. Story 60. It seems that more top military officials will be dismissed once we have a president who knows what they are doing. I would let go of every single person that Trump hires. Story 61. Retired General John Kelly, who served as White House Chief of Staff during the Trump administration, stated that former President Trump praised Adolf Hitler's generals for their loyalty in a new interview with The Atlantic on Tuesday. In the interview with editor-in-chief Jeffrey Goldberg, Kelly confirmed the reporting from Peter Baker and Susan Glasser's book, The Divider, Trump in the White House, 2017 to 2021, which quoted Trump asking Kelly, his chief of staff at the time, "Why can't you be like the German generals?" Kelly explained to Trump that the German generals tried to kill Hitler 3 times and almost pulled it off. But Trump reportedly was not swayed by this correction. No, they were totally loyal to him, Trump said, according to Goldberg's account of Baker and Glasser's reporting. Story 62. Rather than needing to find new individuals who will blindly follow orders to fill positions of authority, you can eliminate those positions of authority. Fewer people are needed to implement your agenda. This is not a good situation. Story 63. Removing anyone who hesitates when the order comes from the individual in power to act against American citizens. Story 64. You only remove the military because they will not support your plans. Nothing good comes from this. Story 65. It's an anti-coup, removing those who uphold the Constitution to replace them with those who yield to the orange one. Story 66. Fewer people resist his changes. Fewer generals and admirals mean fewer individuals you need to ensure are on your side when attempting to use the army to take over the country. Story 67. Anyone who is more knowledgeable than him is a hurdle between him and his goals. I am surprised there are any military leaders left. He is doing the same thing Donald J. Trump did with his cabinet members and staff. In his first term, he mostly chose people with experience who could exert their expertise to slow or stop some of his outlandish plans. Many of them quit in frustration. This term, we see who he has chosen to surround himself with. People who will say yes and are expendable. Story 68. Because you cannot have a military state if the leaders believe in the Constitution. You just need to remove those individuals and ensure that the ones remaining will do whatever you want them to do. Story 69. It makes it harder for a military-style coup to occur once they start saving taxpayer money by removing care for veterans and other unethical practices that some may support. Story 70. Weeding out anyone who does not support Trump when he decides to use the military against us. Before someone argues that he cannot do that, there are many things he cannot do that he is doing anyway, and even the Supreme Court has failed to enforce obedience. This situation arises when enforcement is limited to one branch of government. Story 71. It has already been announced by the Secretary of Defense that the military is being realigned to prioritize wartime operations. Command will be based on merit. Story 72. It's the purge, man. North Korea is taking notes on how to implement this strategy for their next military purge. Story 73. Hegseth knows that if you want to get rid of unwanted fat, just remove the source. You don't really need professional expertise when you can surround yourself with eager supporters who have few practical skills. Story 74. He is getting back at the senior officers who gave him a tough time when he was in the military and at those who talked negatively about him when he was a commentator on television. It is all about revenge. Story 75. He is following the plan. For the fascist power takeover, you need to eliminate other power elites that remain loyal to the Constitution. The Nazis did the same back then. It is quite concerning how many parallels exist between Hitler's and Trump's governments. Story 76. They are clearly planning to conduct illegal military actions and need to eliminate anyone who believes that their duty to both the law and the Constitution outweighs their obedience to the president. Story 77. I am not in favor of Hegseth at all, but before he arrived, there were articles suggesting that the military had too many generals. If you follow this topic, you would understand. I believe he was emphasizing the issue of weight, as approximately 12% of senior officer staff is overweight. It is easier to make decisions based on broad metrics rather than evaluating individuals on a case-by-case basis for reductions. I have concerns about who is allowed to stay or go, given this administration's tendency to favor political appointees. Story 78. Trump has clearly stated he has no desire to run again, but he did not say he does not want to be president. He does want to be president, just no elections. They have been saying this for a couple of years. No more elections. Getting rid of the military leadership that would object is just another step toward that end. Story 79. He is removing individuals who understand current global issues and replacing them with supporters of Trump. Story 80. Why pretend you don't know? They are rapidly descending into totalitarian fascism, and they need to remove those in the military who might resist. This has been obvious for months. Story 81. It's clear that currently, only the military remains as a potential force to oppose Trump and remove him from office. Story 82. They had largely reiterated their oath to the Constitution and not the president, meaning they would defy any illegal or unconstitutional order. For example, this includes ordering soldiers and the National Guard to round up legal citizens who happen to be people of color or invading friendly nations without cause. Story 83. We understand the situation clearly because it has happened before. The oppressive regime is consolidating power. Story 84. It is a continuation of the coup. They are preparing to direct military action against dissenting citizens. Story 85. My guess is it involves anyone who opposed the military area declared around El Paso, where soldiers can now enforce civilian laws such as immigration. This is a fundamentally unconstitutional act. Story 86. They are making the military loyal to them. This is a crucial step in the move toward a successful dictatorship. If you know anything about world history, this is one of the most important warning signs of a complete autocratic takeover of a country. Story 87. The administration needs to remove anyone who questions illegal orders, such as using soldiers to arrest citizens. Story 88. The contrast between the responses in this thread and what is being said in the Air Force community is amusing. Airmen largely support it, while the general population on Reddit believes the situation is dire. Story 89. This is no different than in private companies where you need to remove the old personnel to transform. You wouldn't remain silent if a Democratic appointee were making changes. He isn't looking for agreeable individuals. He is seeking the most capable leaders to guide, and right now the top leaders in the military are not the most capable. Story 90. We are rapidly approaching a point where the military will be asked to do things that are unconstitutional, possibly illegal, and certainly immoral. At that time, honorable military leadership will refuse orders. It is advisable to address this situation before it arises if you do not want the military to challenge your regime. Story 91. The senior leadership excess in the Department of Defense is real. While many people oppose this action due to political reasons and the current administration, there is nothing inherently wrong with critically examining the issue and attempting to address it. Story 92. I believe the military may be ordered to shoot Americans in the legs this summer. I think they will comply. I believe America is facing threats from both foreign and domestic enemies, and the military is not taking action. Story 93. There are many outdated individuals in high positions within the military. The military used to encourage retirement by age 50, but some individuals are now serving well beyond 60, which is long past the point of being effective in a real wartime scenario. They function more as bureaucrats than as active military personnel, often maintaining close relationships with suppliers and contractors. There is no justification for the military's high expenses. There is significant waste, and the current bureaucratic leadership has not taken any steps to address this issue, leading to skepticism about their ability to initiate meaningful change. The military requires new leadership. Story 94. One of the first things to happen in any authoritarian takeover is that gaining the loyalty of the military is essential. Achieving that loyalty requires placing loyalists and yes-men in the highest levels of leadership. I will be very candid. It looks bleak for American democracy. The foundation is eroding faster than I ever anticipated. If and when they gain the loyalty of the military, it will be officially over. Congress will cease to matter, the courts will not matter, laws will not matter, and civil demonstrations will become immensely dangerous. The Constitution is not a self-enforcing document and only holds significance as much as people value it. If people do not care to enforce it, then it is just words on paper. So, even if the Democratic Party sweeps the midterms in 2026, it truly doesn't matter if the military has become wholly subservient to the president. They can impeach and remove him from office, but it won't matter if the military and law enforcement will not enforce the Constitution. The politicization of the military poses a significant threat to a democratic society, even if it has the most well-armed civilian population on Earth. I dislike saying this because it is inherently alarmist, but I believe it is time to ring the alarm bells while we still can. Story 95. What kind of question is this? Project 2025 has been public knowledge for quite some time. Do people still think this is all a silly joke? Story 96. It's a loyalty purge. They are removing anyone who would be more loyal to the Constitution than to the sitting president. Story 97. Depends on your political affiliation, I suppose. I'm not sure we get any objective information in these scenarios. One side will say he's replacing great people who have only ever been the best with individuals who are loyal to him and Donald Trump. The other side will say he's getting rid of people who have proven to be incompetent and ineffective as leaders in war and are potential leakers. Story 98. They dislike him and have no respect for him. They consider him a fool and a total loser. Every time they speak to him, they talk down to him. He is aware of this. He also knows he is unable to earn or deserve their respect. Therefore, they need to leave. They likely dislike the entire idea of a military parade as well. Story 99. Look into dictatorships. Most of them include purging the military of anyone who might not be loyal to them. The Trump administration is a textbook authoritarian dictatorship. It involves government and military purges, judicial acquiescence, suspension of due process, and the mass disappearance of innocent or untried citizens to concentration camps in other countries. Story 100. He is getting rid of anyone who will object when Trump runs his coup. The reason Hegseth has not been dismissed is that Trump needs someone who will support his coup. I assume individuals like that are difficult to replace. Story 101. He is finding nationalists and loyalists. They started dismantling the government from the inside on day one. Now they are stripping away anyone who opposes their leader, so when they take the next step towards dictatorship, it will be an easy transition. Story 102. From what I understand, it's a confirmation of comments by Trump to reduce numbers and remove anyone who doesn't submit to him. It's not a thought or plan from Hegseth. Story 103. When you remove those who would usurp your ill-gained power, your power moves closer to being absolute. What do you think is happening? It seems quite clear to me. Story 104. He is weakening our military at Putin's request. The same reason he uses messaging apps. Everything they do should be noted as per the Federal Records Act, but they do not want to record their actions. We have an administration focused on the destruction of our nation, including our institutions and democracy. Story 105. Race to the bottom. Bad and incompetent leaders, as opposed to just incompetent ones, like to surround themselves with people even less competent than themselves so that they can be the smartest person in the room. The individuals they bring intend to do the same within their own departments. The next administration will have significant house cleaning to do when they finally take office. Story 106. The goal appears to be removing the experience so that once a real war breaks out, United States forces will be ineffective. Story 107. He is replacing professionals with political loyalists. This approach works well until an actual war arises, requiring military leadership from individuals who possess the necessary expertise, as demonstrated by Stalin in 1941 after he had purged the officer corps of the Red Army in the 1930s. Story 108. It is a coup, and they only want individuals who will follow illegal, unconstitutional, and partisan orders that will be imposed on Americans. Story 109. He is trying to make it easier for foreign adversaries to take over, and I am sure he will profit significantly from it. Story 110. It is a soft coup. It is easier to declare martial law if you install puppets loyal to an authoritarian regime rather than to the Constitution. Story 111. I heard we caught a Russian spy who had Hegseth's personal number on his phone. Can anyone else verify this? Because that is significant treason. Story 112. He, at the order of his boss, is eliminating anyone they suspect will obstruct their efforts to declare martial law and unleash the military on the American public. Story 113. I usually do not oppose making career politicians retire, as that is essentially what military leaders are. However, they are military, and interfering during a time like this raises some concerns. Story 114. Just another way to eliminate any opposition, control the narrative, and consolidate power. Military leaders with integrity will uphold their oath. Story 115. Like the Nazis did, get rid of competent people and fill all spots with loyalists. The government cleanup after this administration is going to be massive. Story 116. They do not want thinkers. They do not want deliberators. They want people who fulfill their orders without hesitation or question. Story 117. Historically, tight control of the military is a strategy that allows an authoritarian leader to remain in power and avoid being forcibly removed. A controlled military also enables the despot to instill fear and physical harm upon individuals and groups who might protest. In an autocracy, the chief executive must also consider the loyalty of the individual who controls the military. That person could stage a coup from within. Both individuals must be aware of the potential threat posed by former generals and other high-ranking officers who resent the autocrat and may seek support among rank-and-file troops. A move like this, removing and replacing generals and other high-ranking officers, simultaneously provides an autocrat with the illusion of control over the military while fostering fear of losing that control. Story 118. I believe he discovered that there is too much integrity among high-level officers. He cannot work with that. Story 119. These individuals use their positions to eliminate existing figures with knowledge and experience to challenge them. Wake up, America, we are being compromised. Story 120. My guess is he is trying to get rid of confident, established leadership and replace it with young, ambitious, easily manipulated individuals who will follow his war plans, possibly to invade Canada while the North Atlantic Treaty Organization is busy defending against Russia. Generals who turn against him or do not comply will pose a problem unless they can quietly eliminate them. Story 121. Putting trusted individuals in positions of power ensures that when another coup occurs in 2028, they can request assistance from the United States military. Story 122. It's a full Stalin move, and unfortunately, it seems that the MAGA movement is succeeding with their project. I'm sure Putin is happy with how weak the United States has become. Story 123. Likely replacing them with individuals who will use the military against U.S. citizens at Trump's request. Story 124. If you eliminate everyone who would oppose you while attempting to turn the country into a dictatorship, no one will resist your efforts to establish a dictatorship. Story 125. In all likelihood, they are purging the military of leaders who are loyal to the United States instead of Donald Trump. This is an important step for him to officially become a dictator. Story 126. Read about either Hitler or Putin becoming the dictators they are. They did the same thing for similar reasons. Story 127. There is an internal conflict in the Republican Party and the administration between the war hawk neoconservatives and the more traditional anti-war conservatives. Netanyahu has been advocating for the United States to initiate a conflict with Iran for decades, and the pressure has intensified. Many believe that Israel's actions in Gaza are at least partially intended to provoke Iran into taking actions that will compel the United States to respond. You may notice that the messaging in U.S. media is very pro-war, as nearly everything negative occurring in the Middle East is labeled in some way as being backed by Iran. Trump has so far been unwilling to engage, but Marco Rubio is eager to proceed. Various factions have been working to eliminate opponents from the administration. The anti-war individuals are pushing out war hawks under their influence, while the war hawks are pushing out anti-war individuals under their influence. This is why Mike Walls was recently removed, and also why Dan Caldwell, Darren Selnick, and Colin Carroll were removed. Story 128. They are prioritizing loyalty over competence, so they face no pushback when attempting to violate the Constitution and the Geneva Convention. It resembles the concept of night of 1,000 paper cuts. They are gradually implementing tactics similar to those used by Hitler to consolidate military power, ensuring loyalty to a single leader rather than to the state. Story 129. The military is the only true enforcer of violations of the executive branch. It is the last line of defense before a democracy becomes an autocracy or dictatorship. Congress can impeach, but it will be impossible to get enough senators on board to do so. If the military has only blind, unconstitutional loyalists throughout its upper ranks, there are no obstacles when, for instance, the Supreme Court rules an action unconstitutional and the President and the Department of Justice ignore the court's ruling. We are already at that point as a country. The final step would theoretically be to neutralize the military leadership and ensure there are always enough senators available to prevent impeachment. Story 130. They are completely creating their own system, a personal army of henchmen that they will use against the American people. They are making it illegal to not support the authoritarian state they have created and will need a loyal army without any leadership or guidance from the more educated military leaders in top positions. Without leaders, the chance of a soldier refusing orders to harm lawful Americans will be minimal. Everything this administration is doing is preparation for total control. A significant portion of their actions is directly copied from historical authoritarian regimes. It worked then, and it continues to be effective today. Story 131. Reddit may express opinions like, Baya, Nazis. Others recognize that we have been appointing more generals than necessary as favors. We currently have more generals than at any time in our military history. Several independent and bipartisan military and strategy think tanks have been advocating for a reduction in high-ranking positions for over a decade. The bureaucracy is overwhelming. These positions are being cut, not replaced with compliant individuals. Reddit is uninformed, as it relies on news for education. Story 132. Cover for loyalty tests. When they need the troops to fire on protesters, there cannot be any questioning of orders. Story 133. He is eliminating those who have earned the respect of the troops and would stand up for the Constitution. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.